Might as well start promptly, I think, don't you? Okay, so it seems like I'm the only one anyway unmuted at the moment. So good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and welcome. I'm going to do a super brief overview of what the Community Planning Alliance is. I think most of you actually are familiar names, so you'll know what we're up to. But we were founded back in March this year with the map, which now has 460 campaign groups on it. It's been viewed 114,000 times. And we have a Facebook group already with 1,100 people on it, and that's without really trying. We haven't done any sort of promotion on it yet. And a very lively, fantastic Facebook group, actually. So any of you that are on it, thank you for all your comments and input. And I think people are finding it very useful already. So that's great. We will be formally constituted as a group in July after our meeting, when we'll be electing officers and committee members. And from then on, we can start to sort of work out our strategy, bid for funds if we need it, and get to work properly supporting all the groups out there on the map and lobbying government for change. So that's a bit about us. And then I'm going to pass over to Caroline Dibden from Hampshire, who is going to introduce our two speakers tonight. Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you very much. Unlike most of the people in the group, I have actually met both Nick and Simon, because we are all together working in Hampshire. We met through CPRE, Campaign to Protect Rural England, as it was, now the Countryside Charity, which does what it says on the tin. And Simon and Nick have worked together on the Four and Medstead Neighbourhood Plan for, I think, many years, and that will be the tale of the evening. And so we welcome them both. And what Rosie and I are going to do is try and spot any questions in the chat as we go along. And we will interrupt Simon and Nick if we think that's a sort of appropriate time. And so over to Simon and Nick.
Thank you very much, Caroline. I'm just going to load up a few charts, and just to make everybody feel very happy about it, it is not going to be death by PowerPoint. This is about us talking. Can you see the chart okay? Everybody's muted themselves.
Yep.
Yes, I can.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Great. Okay. If there's a really urgent pressing question that is fundamental to the understanding, by all means ask us, but we have an entire section at the end for questions and answers, so please hold back until then if necessary. And Rosie and Caroline have got preferential permission to interrupt us if they think we need putting back on track again. I mean, Nick and I, as Caroline indicated, have worked together on the Neighbourhood Plan for a number of years. Nick as the chairman of the steering group, and myself as a parish councillor for Four, one of the two parishes that combined to produce the Neighbourhood Plan. Just very quickly about us, this is just going to be a 10-year journey. It goes back to 2011. I was back in 2005 a very apathetic resident. I actually didn't even know what a parish council was. I had no idea. And a developer decided he wanted to buy 3 gardens and build 15 houses to create a cul-de-sac in what was a country lane. So we became a campaigner with some neighbours of ours and eventually most of the residents. That ended up with a very successful campaign called Fight for Four. We gained quite a reputation, certainly in Hampshire, and I'm told elsewhere. I then became a Hampshire parish councillor, as in did 2 other members of the committee, and 2 of our members of the committee of the campaign group actually went on to become district councillors, because we decided the way to change the system was from the inside, not necessarily from the outside. Very recently, a year or so ago, I became a CPRE policy planning group member, which is where I also met Caroline, although I had attended meetings beforehand, before I was a member, listening to what they were doing. And so I've got a bit of planning experience over 15 years. Today, we're going to concentrate on neighbourhood plans. So just to very briefly hand over to Nick to introduce himself.
Thanks, Simon. I first came across neighbourhood planning when I was actually still in business. So if you like, on the other side of the fence, it was an agricultural business, and we were constantly being approached by local people, commenting on our activities and expressing their displeasure at our determination to expand the business and have a prosperous future. In that process, I came across neighbourhood planning. It was introduced just as I was finishing my time with the business, and actually it struck me at that stage that it was the core idea was an extremely good idea. So when I stepped back from actually being in the business and retired from there, I decided to get involved locally, and got involved with the, as Simon has said, with the Medstead and Four Marks Neighbourhood Plan, and have been the chairman of that steering group since 2014.
Thank you, Nick. Just to be very clear, I did not get involved in the neighbourhood plan directly until it actually was made. It was adopted when I then became chairman of the planning committee, and by default the two chairs of the planning committees for the two parish councils were put onto the steering group, along with residents, Nick, and a secretary who is also a resident across the two villages. So I was not there from the start, and Nick is very much the man to talk to about what happened from 2014 onwards. I'm there from the time at which it became a made neighbourhood plan after the referendum. So what we're going to do is just very briefly give you a little bit of context, then what our 10-year journey was, and then talk about some of the promises the government and others gave us, and what some of the realities have been, but then open it out into a Q&A session for the last 20 minutes or so. Where are Medstead and Four Marks? They're in Hampshire, then they are genuinely at the end of the arrow. What you will see is 3 green areas. That is East Hampshire District Council's planning area in which they can build houses. The grey area is the South Downs National Park, and the South Downs National Park Authority has its own local plan, and much of the area there is not for East Hampshire to deliver its housing total of, I believe, around about 11,000 houses over the next 15 years. So you can see as an area we have a problem already in that best part of 2/3 of the area we can't actually allocate houses in. So we, as a arterial settlement along the A31 with a lot of farmland, became a natural target for speculative development. Just to give you a rough idea, about 6,000 population, and the Four Marks parish budget is 150,000, and I believe Medstead's is about 60,000. So you can go, and at the end I will have a whole load of references that you can go to if you don't know much about neighbourhood planning. It is a formal end-to-end process, government sponsored. If you go onto gov.uk, you can see what the government want to tell you about it, and there really are an incredible number of processes and steps that you have to go through, and Nick can talk about some of those later on. What they really want you to do, though, is this is a planning document. It's not like a village plan or even a community plan. This is an adopted policy document for planning as a supplementary planning policy, which goes alongside the local plan. And in our case, it has been used to both help appeals be dismissed, to refuse applications, and particularly refuse applications out of character within the settlement policy area. And I've just put alongside there some of the key things that a neighbourhood plan does, or you need to think about when preparing a neighbourhood plan. Is you've got to have a very clear vision of what you want, and it's not all about housing. There's a lot of it about environment. There's a lot about it in economic growth, whether it be commercial or agricultural. You need to have very, very clear and very precise policies that are not capable of being twisted around by clever barristers at appeals. It needs to be distinctively local. It needs to separate out what you know about your local area, and that's very much the job that also your parish council should be doing. Evidence, evidence, evidence. I always go on about this, and it needs to be robust. Again, it needs to be barrister proof for when you are at an inquiry level of appeal, less so at a hearing, because hearings are a little bit less informal, but the evidence is just as important. It also needs to be very open and transparent and accepted by the community, and you must have a very clear intent behind those policies and what your rationale is. And then the final thing is always be bold and ambitious. And I think that's something when we revisit this in future years, we'll look back on and say, were we bold enough? Were we ambitious enough? Or, and I'm sure Nick will have a very strong point of view on this, is were we allowed to be bold and ambitious? So a familiar sight to many of you, as is that, we actually ended up with 4 greenfield outside settlement policy but abutting sites. We got a 316 extra dwellings. That was against our joint core strategy local plan target of 175 that were allocated. Those were due to speculative developers coming in whilst we did not have a 5-year land supply. We did not have a local plan because it was lost when the government rescinded the South East plan. And that's in 2 settlements where we only had 1,700 dwellings. So we've had a significant increase, and that was between 2011 and 2013. And you can imagine the state of the community when that started happening. And we live with it to this day. The first good thing was when our local planning authority, East Hampshire District Council, in 2014 adopted the joint core strategy, which was a combined plan with the South Downs National Park. They are now both separate. Both of us have our own separate plans. But in 2014, it was a joint core strategy. That was purely in principle, and that firmed up the 175. But unfortunately, by then, the planning permission for the 316 dwellings had already been given. And to be fair to East Hampshire, they actually did refuse 2 of the sites for Carla Homes and for Bargate, but they were overturned by planning inspectors. And you'll find that the planning inspectorate is a regular occurrence as a thorn in our side. Even better was 2016, when retrospectively those sites were designated as our allocated sites. So we'd far exceeded our intended 175 over 15 years. And it had been done in the first 3 years of the plan period, quite frankly. But those allocations were great. That cemented that in, and it meant that we, since actually 2016, when that was done, we have not had any further planning permissions given on greenfield sites outside the settlement policy boundary. And I'm talking about dozens of applications. And yes, we have had Gladman twice, and we've seen them off twice. We've had also, out of those 20 plus applications, I think probably about 6 or so appeals, 1 hearing and 5 inquiries. And in those cases, they were dismissed, where we as a parish council, where Nick and the Neighbourhood Plan group have worked with the parish councils and us with the local planning authority officers and our district councillors, all together working together to give evidence, to argue objectively back against the developers' plans, and in many cases basically show, quite frankly, we're not sure why the landowner stroke developer paid the consultants, because their evidence was easily dismissed in some cases. And then finally, and what really we're here to talk about today, this is actually what was submitted for examination, but it was May 2016 after a referendum with a 43% turnout, 41% turnout and a 93% yes vote in 2016. The Neighbourhood Plan, 1 month after the allocations had been done, was made and became part of our planning armoury. We are just one neighbourhood plan. The two nearby towns, Alton and Petersfield, both have a neighbourhood plan that came out at around the same time, and there are 3 other parishes in East Hampshire District Council who also had neighbourhood plans. So it's a neighbourhood plan friendly planning authority. Nick and I maybe probably won't agree on this 100%, I'm sure, but I think probably as a local planning authority they weren't bad, and they gave us some help, and they gave us as much help as and more help than I've heard elsewhere. But of course they can always do more. I do know some people have really suffered by getting not just no help but obstruction by their local planning authority. Ours have been relatively helpful and relatively open. Nick, is there anything you'd like to add on the neighbourhood plans side?
Well, it really depends how much detail people would like to go through. As I said, I was there from the very beginning, and one of the questions that often comes up is, why on earth does it take so long to develop a neighbourhood plan? And it's certainly one of the comments that keeps coming back from government. And one of the reasons that it takes a long time is that neighbourhood planning, certainly at that stage, was deliberately set up to be led by volunteers. So that's and actually explicitly at that time, not even parish councillors. The idea was to broaden the base of people getting involved in local issues. And the more that could be normal people rather than either professional planners or parish councils, that would give a much better feeling of the real flavour of the local community. So it was a very good thought, but part of the struggle you have to begin with is that nobody'd really thought through the implications of that. Is that even before you can even get started, you've got to get together a group of local people who will give willingly a lot of their time but don't actually have any real background or experience in the subject. So one of the first things you learn is that is a mismatch, because it's one of those things where bowing to Donald Rumsfeld, it's the unknown unknowns. People join the group not knowing what they don't know, and then they realise that it is massively complicated. There's a huge amount of detail. There's a requirement for precision, accuracy, and as Simon says, evidence base, and that all takes a huge amount of time. And in our experience, the first few meetings typically went round and round in circles because everybody was trying to work out what we had to do and what was important. And so I think that's really the first base. That if people are about to embark on a neighbourhood plan, is understanding some of those real life details. That's before you get into really basic things like you have to have a designated area. Well, yeah. What is your designated area? You've got to find out what your designated area might be. Is it literally your parish boundary, in which case it's probably quite simple. Ours turned out not to be simple because it covered two parishes and a bit of a third. But you can't even begin to move until you've got a designated area.
Great, Nick. Thank you. Thanks for that. I mean, and it really was, wasn't it? I mean, I'm luckily I wasn't involved at that stage. It was about now at 2016 that I actually even got involved. So Nick and the team had done a phenomenal job, and really a job that when the government then announced that local plans were going to be reviewed every 5 years, and we assumed neighbourhood plans would be revised every 5 years, we threw our hands up in horror because of the amount of work, and a lot of residents just said no, we wouldn't do it. This was a plan to 2028 and it should stay as such. So we got to 216 and we were beginning to find we were having greenfields.
Simon, sorry to interrupt. Just before we leave it,
Please,
I think the other central part of it, again, because a lot of the documentation talks about you go through the various phases of consultation and submission of the plan and examination and referendum. Frankly, examination and referendum take up very little of your time. The thing that takes up the vast majority of your time is the consultation.
Yeah.
Getting the evidence base. And again, I don't think this had been really thought through sufficiently when people came up with the notion of neighbourhood planning, and I don't think people even understand it today, because again, the principle is that you are collecting up the views of the community, and you're putting together a community plan that will be voted on by the community. What nobody ever really tells you is how on earth do you establish the views of the community? What is the right process to go about being confident that you've got clear what the views of the community are? Now we decided that the only way to do that with confidence was to make sure that we sent a questionnaire to every single household in the designated area. And that, of course, begs a huge number of questions, like, if you're going to send a questionnaire, what are the questions that you're going to ask? Do you, as a committee, presume to know all the questions that ought to be asked? Or do you actually need an initial consultation with a representative group of the local community, actually to find out what they are thinking about, so that you can frame the questions that are genuinely relevant for the community? So that can be an iterative process. And then the very practicalities of how do you send a questionnaire to every member of every household in the community?
I see Rose's hand pop up there?
Sorry.
Yeah, I think this is a good time to ask for the first question in the chat, which is from Stuart Price, because it fits in with what you're saying. And he wants to know what body dictates all the steps and processes that have to be gone through. And it sounds from what you're saying as some of it's very prescriptive and some of it actually you have to make up as you go. And so I would add to his question about the body that dictates it all. Is there any sort of toolkit that people can use to get started? Is there a nice template that people can use if they're starting afresh?
Yeah, well, you can you can go to the I think, is it in the Localism Act or the Neighbourhood Planning Act? I forget, but there is a regulatory process. I'm going to forget all the different stages, but it's something like from Regulation 13 to Regulation 19, and you can establish from the government's documentation exactly what those steps require. Yeah. For easier reference, there's the neighbourhood plan roadmap published by locality.
Yeah. In fact, somebody's just made that comment, Nick. Locality. Yeah. I've got a list of all of these at the end of the presentation, which will show you them. But there are toolkits. The planning portal's got one, the government's got one, etc., etc. If we can go to those, then that would be really useful.
Yeah, but I think
I didn't know. Yes, say again, Nick.
Most of them, in my view, don't really. I mean, they're very useful. Don't get me wrong, but they don't share some of the nitty-gritty with you. About exactly how do you go about some of these processes, and what is the right way in your community to establish a robust evidence base.
Yeah.
Can I interrupt with
Sorry.
With a question about making sure that you're picking up the people, not the normal suspects, because the government didn't want the normal suspect preparing the plan, which is why they initially said not parish councillors, until they realised that the same sort of people who are parish councillors are the same sort of people who would have the time and energy to do the neighbourhood plans. But that doesn't mean that you can just ignore the people who wouldn't normally respond to consultations and might not even fill in the form that you've been delivering, or that maybe their parents would but the young people wouldn't, or that they were elderly and needed help with the form. I just wondered if you can say how you tried to pick up those, what you might call disenfranchised people, or normally disenfranchised people.
It's extremely difficult. We started off with what I would describe as a reasonably representative group, but within a short space of time, anybody who was in full-time work dropped out. So our steering group ended up essentially with people who were primarily retired. Yeah,
which is the reason actually I wasn't involved. I was then and still am in full-time work. I couldn't afford the time.
That's the reality. So to your point, Caroline, you then have to make sure that the questionnaire or the process of collecting the information is as comprehensive as you can make it. Again, with questionnaires, with public gatherings, you can't force people to come if they don't want to. And I think to be positive about the what's been said in the planning white paper, I think the developments in digital technology that they're talking about will help the process enormously. So I think that is very good, but it's still, even with that, you cannot force somebody to become involved who simply chooses not to be involved. So I think there will always remain the risk of how unrepresentative it is. Having said which, we should not be overly critical. As Simon has said, when it was actually put to a vote within the community, we had a turnout of 41%, which is higher than you would get in local elections. So actually, in terms of being representative of the views of the community, we didn't do that badly. We would have liked to have done better, but we didn't ended up not doing that badly.
Nick, I'd like to move this along. I know there's a number of questions which I can see.
Yep.
I think we're going to cover some of those in a minute. So let's get to there's only a couple more slides to go. Let's get to the end of those. And there was a cracking one in there about, the first one was answered about the legislation, which I hope you've done. It is a mixture, but this is a legal process. This is a legal framework. It is within the Town and Country Planning Act. It is inside the Localism Act, and it's inside the current planning laws and PPG advice. So you have to abide by the rules, although there's flexibility. The one thing that we haven't covered yet that we will cover, or we were going to cover, I'll do it right now, is that certainly my advice is before you go to examination is you have a check. You have a health check of your neighbourhood plan, because I've heard of 2 local parishes to us that actually didn't go to examination when they were meant to, because at the last moment they had a health check and the consultant who did the health check identified some serious flaws. And I know, Nick, and this is a segue to you, because I know you had some issues with the examiner, who actually asked not just within the plan itself, but the forwards by the parish chairman to be changed.
Yes, I would strongly encourage anybody who's embarking on a neighbourhood plan to start from the back end. Read a number of inspectors' reports, examiners' reports, and that will give you a flavour of what you have to do and how they're thinking. I think we had a particularly tough one, from what I understand, who was really very dismissive of a lot of the work that we'd done, which was very dispiriting. And as Simon says, the most depressing observation that he made was that the expressed views of the chairs of the local parish councils, which was in the foreword to the plan, so it wasn't even masquerading as part of the policy. He insisted at the examination that we removed half of what they said, as he said it was unreflective of the planning system. I think that gives you a flavour of the extent to which the end result, the examiner wishes to have a document that is indeed reflective of the planning system. And this is the balance between setting out to develop a plan for your community, which your community want, which is very community-led, but actually ends up having to go through the filter of the legally established planning system. And nobody really tells you that. Even just to, Simon wasn't around at the time, we did get an examiner to check our plan before it went to the examiner. And he said it was fine.
Yeah, I think we've seen that at appeals, Nick, haven't we, as well? No two inspectors the same.
No,
anyway,
no.
Just to move things along. So we're in 2016. We had a couple of years where we had refusals, we had appeals, we had great fun going to appeals and giving evidence, all objective and evidence-based, arguing with barristers, which I loved doing. And the neighbourhood plan was very, very useful. And it really has played trumps in a number of cases, both at appeals and at applications inside the settlement policy boundary, where the developer swore blind that they had a presumption to develop, but not if it's not in character, it isn't, and because that's against policy 1 of our neighbourhood plan. What then happened is the government suddenly announced that that local planning authorities had to review their local plan every 5 years. So we went in early 2019 into a local plan review. We got to regulation 18 by March 2019. Sorry, I bet it started around 2017, early 2018. We got to a regulation 18. The developers forced back against that, and we ended up with a second regulation 18 consultation towards the end of 2019. Which was about some large sites of 600 to 1200 dwellings that they wanted to put on greenfield sites, and in some cases places of significant environmental or landscape value. And CPRE, and I'd give a shout out, Caroline and Christopher and others did a fantastic job in that. That then moved us into 2020, and I think we all know what happened in 2020. So for the last 18 months, not an awful lot been going on. I mean, the local planning authority has done some work. The white paper came out. We all, I think, had a number of issues with that white paper. There's a lot of lobbying of MPs and other people. I know our local authority put in some significant criticism. Caroline did a lot of fantastic work in terms of the revised national calculation, which was a load of old nonsense. But what it's meant is that now they've only just started doing our local plan again. It is not likely to be adopted till 2023. So we face a possible time now. We'll probably be all right on our 5-year land supply, but we won't have a local plan fully weighted. But what we do have is we've got a neighbourhood plan. So we won't review the neighbourhood plan until the local plan's adopted to bring the neighbourhood plan in line with that local plan. And then, of course, our dear friend, Mr. Jenrick, and his ideas within the white paper, in many cases, things like design and the digital bit being brought in by stealth, in my view. We don't know where we're going. We don't know where we're going to be by 2023 anyway, which is the end of the Parliament. Are they going to do their 300,000 a year to make the 1 million houses. We will see. So everything's been left now pretty much in limbo. These are just some of the thoughts, promises and reality. I mean, we've already started talking about government rhetoric. You know, do we believe it? What role do your LPA and your local councils play? Is it positive? Is it negative? Is it neutral? It's not a community document, it's a planning document. It should have equality with and work alongside the local plan, but it needs to be in line with it. We've certainly seen it be effective at applications and appeals. Certainly, Nick, didn't it? It brought the community together, but I think now it's probably frustrated the community even more when some of the settlement policy boundary sites go through on that presumption to develop, and the character policy one isn't necessarily brought in. And in terms of SIL, I mean, SIL hasn't worked. We're meant to get 25%. We've had, certainly with little cul-de-sacs and stuff, self-build, so they're exempt. The S106s continue, but for us, SIL hasn't really been anything that's come through because we haven't had anything major passed since 2016. So that's a call to you guys to watch very carefully what's going on in your particular local planning authority. And then finally, there's some information and resources. So what we wanted to do with that was to move into the Q&A. So let me just throw one at you, Nick. And thanks to everybody who put in their comments about where you can go for help to look at this. I mean, Sammy said that they started a neighbourhood plan, Nick, 8 years ago and submitted it, and it's still not been implemented. And they've got mass development, hike, and still no neighbourhood plan. I mean, we don't know the background behind that, Sammy, but that seems to be an inordinately long time for it not to be implemented. And just Nick, from our experience, what do you think are some of the things that they ought to be doing in terms of talking to their local planning authority about that?
Well, I think you have to start there, because as you said earlier, Simon, you do need a supportive local planning authority. I think the other point that is often misunderstood is the importance of hiring a good planning consultant. Now that's incredibly difficult on the sort of budget that typically the local planning authority will give you to hire them. But that is essential to at least start you off on the straight and narrow, because of the challenges that you face. I think the third point I would make with anybody who's really struggling to do it is the point I made earlier about starting from the far end, which is actually working out what the examiner wants. And working backwards from there.
Yep, thanks, Nick. There's a great question from David Farnsworth here. He says, given all the work, how far do we feel that the process has, one, created planning skills amongst the community? Let's deal with these one at a time. For me, as a parish councillor, it's fantastic because we've got people in our community who understand how planning works. So we tend to be very objective, very matter of fact, very evidentially. Yes, of course, people get very upset about environmental issues in particular, but the amount of core planning knowledge, I think, is way above normal. So that's the first thing. Community participation, Nick, I mean, what's been your experience of that during the life of the Neighbourhood Plan Steering Committee?
Well, early on, it was very good, because the rhetoric at that stage coming out of government, if you read any of the stuff that was published about community, getting people involved, the MPPF, even the first MPPF, the introduction, I think it was Grant Shapps at the time, said for too long planning has been all secretive and behind closed doors, and now we're opening it up for the community to get involved. People, I think a number of people took them at their word and did get very involved and put in a lot of the hard yards. It's fair to say there were still a number of people who were cynical and said, we've been here before, don't believe a word of it. But I think up to the getting the plan made, as I say, we had a 41% turnout, which was really very good. People were very supportive, and that was a turnout at a referendum. Now, perhaps naively, the people in our community thought that when the government held a referendum, which was the local people exercising their democratic rights, that once you'd got the answer to that referendum, even if it was only 52% to 48%, the view of the will of the people had to be respected. So when we had a 93% to 7%, everybody was confident that we had a plan that would be respected. I think what's happened subsequently has then undermined a lot of that confidence, and I think people are now very sceptical because there have been a number of areas in which the whole process has been undermined, and people might want to ask some questions about. But I think the planning white paper is a very good example of that.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. David's third part to that question is about promoting democracy, and I know you and I are completely aligned on that. It's done exactly the opposite. And Susan Jamson, I mean, lovely to meet you online, Susan. You know, we've exchanged some messages on Facebook, I know, and I really feel for what you're going through. I mean, this I just find quite extraordinary. You've only got parish councillors or friends of parish councillors, some of whom don't even live in your parish. The consultant working on your neighbourhood plan was head of planning and instigated the local plan. The parish council want planning on the green belt. Well, I'm not going to comment on that. You know, there may be reasons for that, but not necessarily acceptable. But the fact that they're secretive and not open, and you were on the working party but have resigned because they weren't involving the community. Well, to me, that sounds completely and totally against everything that localism and neighbourhood planning stands for.
That's Nick? Exactly what I feel.
Nick, do you agree?
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. It's a manipulation of the system. Clearly, even now, I think a lot of the comments coming out of government still support neighbourhood planning and the contribution it can make to the community. I think that thought is still very much around. It's the practicalities of how it works that is the problem. So if even that community base isn't there, I would be very concerned about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hand up from David Farnsworth. So I don't know if he wants to follow up with this question. David, do you want to unmute?
Rosie, I'm not sure we've got time to do comebacks. David, if we've got time, can we come back to you at the end? I'm just anxious to make sure everybody gets a crack here.
Of course.
Here we go. Kevin has said public engagement was via notice boards at the Village Fete Primary School flower show. Post-it note comments, got loads of comments, worked well, and was praised when the inspector. Brilliant, well done, very good. You know, great best practice. It worked in your community. Excellent. That's the sort of thing that I think Rosie and Caroline and Marge. That's the sort of thing I think we need to build into a best practice guide. Al has asked a specific question, I think, about our neighbourhood plan, Nick. Did our local plan allocation bake in some bad planning decisions? Oh my God, yes, it did, because they were wrong place, wrong houses, wrong mix, wrong tenure, wrong pricing levels on greenfield speculative sites. But they'd already, because we didn't have a 5-year land supply or a local plan, they were approved or won at appeal. Were we able to hold off the local plan allocations until you'd refine the local plan policies? No, they were done. So we didn't have the situation of doing our own allocations. We know that the neighbouring parish, Rockley, have done their own allocations, but be very, very careful, because those allocations are in addition to the local planning authority allocations. They're not. You can't say we don't want to take what we're allocated. You can add to it, but you can't take it away. So be very careful. Yeah, I mean, Simeon and Susan answering to you, and I think perhaps maybe you and Simeon should talk offline here. Absolutely right in what Simeon's suggesting. Talk to the community. If people need a public campaign and they need to be outed on their lack of transparency or voting them out, do it. Absolutely. That's great. Sammy, you're not going to get a second go at this, or even a third one. But I know Caroline said that explains a lot, Sammy. That's great. And we've got Kevin back again, and Susan and Peter. Yeah, okay, that's great. Right, Martin Edwards. You've been sitting there listening to all of this, Martin. I'll leave you to disclose your profession, sir, should you wish to do so. But do you have any comments?
I hope I don't get howls of derision when I say I'm a planning barrister. Bit long in the tooth now, and been writing on planning as well for people like the Estates Gazette and the Journal of Planning Law for more decades than I care to remember. I just simply wanted to say, I actually have to say, I started off in 2011 when Eric Pickles floated the idea of neighbourhood planning as being characteristically dismissive, as you'd expect most members of the planning bar to be. But over the years, I've reassessed neighbourhood planning, and I actually think neighbourhood planning is a great way forward if only we can rely on the government to give it the resources that it needs. And I have acted for a number of parish councils in defending their neighbourhood plans when there've been challenges sometimes in the High Court. And one of the things you will find is that the judges are very sympathetic towards neighbourhood plans. You know, I think today has been extremely interesting because we at the planning bar, we never see the work that you lot put in. But you no doubt would have seen some of my colleagues come along and be condescending towards you all and your little neighbourhood plan and how it's going to stop Gladman building 250 homes around there. It's an important document that you've got. And I recently was involved in one case, which Rosie knows about. I was brought in where the examiner had been very dismissive of the local plan. And it was in Hertfordshire. It's called Gilston. And I was brought in because the inspector, who's now retired, well-known planning QC, was very dismissive of putting the note, and I was asked to address that note, and Rosie's seen the note. It's referred to in the examiner's report. And I think he plagiarised me, but I'm quite happy because he turned around and, having been dismissive, he turned around and thoroughly endorsed it. Obviously, some editing work was needed to be done because there was lots of duplication in it, but he endorsed it, and it was approved by a referendum of 98% in favour. And lo and behold, as is often the case, the clients never tell you what happened. I found out that 3 weeks ago it won the National Planning Awards 2021 top prize by Planning Magazine. So, and it's a very positive document. So it was the neighbourhood that wanted to plan positively. They knew they had to take major development in their area, and they wanted to make sure they had effective control over the outcome. And it was welcomed by the local planning authority as well, and by some of the landowners. So it was a very, very positive document. And I think neighbourhood planning has a really positive contribution to make. And it's been great to hear from all your real problems that you have to deal with. I mean, the biggest one is no one gives you any money. I mean, you can buy a bag of chips, which are more expensive than the amount they fund you for a neighbourhood plan. You do sterling work, and people shouldn't be deterred. They should really, really be enthused. The one cloud on the horizon, and you've already touched upon this, is the white paper and the proposals for the planning system. My views on this are well known, but they probably would end up in the libel courts if I said what I thought about the people, the architects behind it. I think they are bad, very bad for local democracy, and I think they won't work. If you've read the policy exchange material, it is really, really poor quality in my view. So put that to one side, keep an eye on what happens in Westminster. I think there's a lot on the plate for politicians there, but keep fighting for local plans and fighting for neighbourhood plans. Your biggest weakness also is, as you've already highlighted, is when you've got a local planning authority that hasn't got a 5-year housing land supply. It can undo a lot of your good work, but don't be disheartened. Keep battling on.
Fantastic. Martin, thank you for those great words. And can I assume that you and the cat will not be exchanging Christmas cards just this year then?
I hardly ever exchange Christmas cards with them, that's right.
Lovely. There's some really, really lovely comments coming through as well on the feed. Thank you.
Simon, could I just come back on the...
Yes, Nick. So I was going to come to David Farnsworth as well in a second after you, Nick. So Nick, go ahead.
Quickly to follow up Martin's comments on the planning white paper. I think if anybody does have an opportunity to contact their local MP, the 2 points to make to them, because clearly the planning white paper says that it's in favour of neighbourhood planning, it's supportive of neighbourhood planning, which is good. But the 2 points to make is what will the powers of a neighbourhood plan be under the new rules and regulations, because it appears only to be restricted to design. And secondly, with the new time scale for the development of local plans, which they're talking about being 30 months, and it's split into 4 stages, how on earth would the neighbourhood planning process fit into those stages? So those are the 2 questions I would put.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. David Farnsworth, I think you wanted to have a comeback question or a comment.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you fine, sir.
Okay, thanks, Simon. It's just that when you were answering my first question about whether you felt that after all the work, the exercise did in fact promote democracy, you seem to say no. And if I add that to the idea that, am I right in thinking you also, somebody in the conversation was saying that some neighbourhood plans are great and some are rubbish. So my question really is, what really makes the big difference between the good ones and the bad ones?
Wow, that's a massive question, and that's probably Rosie, Caroline, Marge. That's a whole new hours webinar, I would propose. I think.
Well, give me a hint.
Yeah, in answer to your question, David, I don't think it's good for democracy, because I think what it's done is it's given false expectations to some communities. And even where there's been a relatively successful, in our case, neighbourhood plan, I think it has had a depressive effect on people engaging in the democratic process. There are lots of other reasons why the democratic process is under strain as well. To Martin's point about what the successful neighbourhood plan that won the planning award, well, I think obviously that will have done an enormous amount of positive good in terms of the democratic process. But I think the problem we've got, and it goes back to Nick's last point, was that if in the new planning white paper, the 13-month delivery of a local plan and a purely a 6-week consultation period to do, to get involved, and no consultation at application stage, I don't understand how anybody with any ounce of intelligence can possibly propose that that's improved community engagement. Maybe I'm missing something, but I just don't get it. Martin, yes, please.
Could I just simply say and just remind everybody that when the Labour government passed the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004, it said with confidence that all local authorities would have district-wide local plans by September 27, 3 years. And most of us thought, you must be joking. And here we are in 2021, and we're still not anywhere near 70% coverage of neighbourhood plans. So when I read the white paper, I thought somebody here really is living in la la land. Then again, I looked at who the authors of who behind the white paper were, and I read their profiles. I just simply do not believe it. I really don't. I don't think you get a betting book open at Ladbrokes on the possibilities of that. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It just simply won't happen.
Yeah, I get the impression from a lot of nodding heads around the videos that most people would agree with that position, Martin. Okay, so I mean, from Caroline and Rosie, I know we're just seeing some comments from you guys coming through, and to Nick's call, write to your MPs, write to your local planning authority councillors, and Rosie's mentioned Professor Gavin Parker from Reading University, who's made some fantastic points in his research. This is a serious issue, and the grandly called ministry now, shades of 1984 coming through there, because it used to be just a department. Self-promotions makes it more important, not. What they're putting out really, it needs contesting, and it needs thorough debate from an objective point of view with evidence. That's certainly where I would end up with this. Nick, do you have any final comments?
No, I would just restate that fundamentally neighbourhood plans are a very good idea, but they've got completely lost in the practicalities and the implementation. And to the point about democracy, yes, I think it does undermine it when you set people up to pursue a particular line, and then you the processes constantly undermine it. We spent 2 years working on a plan that we were told was going to last for 15. Within a short period of time after the plan was made, we were told its maximum shelf life was probably 5. It's simply unrealistic to ask the general public to spend 2 years working on a plan which isn't going to last probably more than 3 years.
Yeah,
that's how you lose trust.
Rosie, Martin's got his hand up again. Should we give him the last word?
I've just messaged him. It might be a legacy hand. Martin, is that a legacy hand from previously, or would you like to speak?
It's a legacy hand, sorry.
Oh, okay. Well,
thought so.
In which
Excellent.
case,
Shall I wrap up?
Can Nick and I hand over back to Caroline?
Yeah, well, back to me. I don't mind, Caroline. Do you want me to do it?
No, you go ahead, Rosie.
Okay. Well, look, thank you so much, you two. That was really, really interesting. And I have sort of talked to many people about neighbourhood plans locally and heard all sorts of stories, but that was mostly positive. So I hope people will be going off feeling compelled to go and get involved in their neighbourhood plan committee. I'm going to take away 3 things from this evening. One is that we should write to our MPs. So I will circulate some information tomorrow on email and Facebook group and so on about your 2 points, and maybe Gavin Parker's 6 points. The other one is that it's evidence, evidence, evidence. And the final point is look at the end result first. Read as many inspectors' reports as you can before you embark on the process. And actually, do you know what? The evidence, evidence, evidence and read inspectors' reports are both, they equally legitimate for a local plan involvement as well. So those are good points, full stop. So no, thank you very much. Thank you for the audience for some brilliant questions and chat, and thank you, Martin, as well, for the impromptu involvement. Thank you, and this has been recorded, so we can put this on our website in due course. Thank you all.
Many thanks. Bye.
Good night.